It's the early 1600s. The Dutch Republic had just wrecked Spain in the War of Independence and is now becoming a global empire. A booming economy, breakthroughs in science, financial innovation, all culminating in the Dutch Golden Age. Due to its geographical location, the Netherlands' influence in global trade was massive, and Dutch merchants were getting rich beyond imagination. Just a few decades earlier in 1593, tulips were first brought to Holland from Persia by the Ottoman Empire. The flower took forever to grow, around 7 to 12 years, and could only be pulled from the ground and exchanged for 4 months out of the entire year. So basically, they were very rare. Due to this rarity, the tulip was immediately considered a symbol of wealth and status amongst the Dutch elites, who planted them in their gardens to flex on the working class. They would even strategically place mirrors in their gardens to give the illusion that they had more tulips than they actually did. Tulips had always been expensive, but their price had always been relatively stable. That wasn't until 1634, when Dutch merchants, currently balling from the spice trade and having been complete brokies their entire lives, wanted to flaunt their newfound wealth, and the tulip was the perfect way to do so. And thus, the first wave of large-scale buying occurred. Supply was low and demand was high, so naturally, the price of tulips began to rise. In the 1630s, tulip trading mainly took place in the grimy basements of Amsterdam taverns, where dozens of drunks, prostitutes, and degenerate gamblers would congregate. Routine tulip trading would often devolve into absolute depravity. Large-scale brawls were a regular occurrence, and traders would constantly shit-talk and insult one another. It was in one of these taverns, amidst all the degeneracy, that the futures derivative as we know it today was invented. What are futures? Basically, a contract to buy or sell an asset at a future date for a set price. So, you have a tulip in your garden, someone else wants to buy it. You can't just pull it out of the ground to sell it now, because the tulip will die. So instead, the buyer purchases a contract promising a future sale of the tulip when it's ready to be harvested. Initially, it was only wealthy aristocrats that bought tulips to hodl and show off. In most cases, it wasn't considered an actual investment, but by 1636, that completely changed. As demand kept rising and the price began to skyrocket, it seemed that it would never stop. Everyone was buying up tulips at a staggering rate, and speculation was through the fucking roof. To them, it was literally free money. Stories were plentiful of speculators selling family businesses, accepting money from dangerous loan sharks, and even inheriting money from relatives who had just died from the then ongoing bubonic plague, only to then immediately dump all this cash into the highly speculative tulip market. So whilst the more mature investors bought safer, more stable stocks like the Dutch East India Company, the 17th century's biggest degenerates were YOLOing their life savings in tulips. Those futures contracts we talked about before, well, a single contract was being traded up to 10 times in a single day. At this point, nobody was buying tulips for any reason other than to immediately resell them for profit to literally any retard willing to buy them. This later became known as the Greater Fool's Theory. Basically, this theory suggests that Degenerate A can still make money after purchasing an already overvalued asset by selling it to Degenerate B, who exceeds Degenerate A in retardation and thus is the greater fool. This cycle continues until the asset is so overvalued that no one, no matter how retarded, will buy it. From here, the bubble will promptly burst, and the asset's value will nosedive. But the Dutch didn't have to worry about any of that. Yet. Because by 1636, the price of tulips had gone to the moon. The market was so lucrative that thousands of degenerate gamblers had amassed great fortunes far beyond their comprehension. At the height of tulip mania, a single tulip bulb was selling for 200 guilders, 10 times the yearly salary of a skilled craftsman at the time. Tulips with rare skins, such as the Emperor Augustus, which had a weird colour pattern caused by a virus, sold for upwards of 12,000 guilders, more than enough to buy an 8-bedroom canal-side mansion in Amsterdam. There even became a point where vendors began opting for payment via tulip bulbs instead of guilders, the Dutch currency at the time. But unfortunately, the price of tulips couldn't rise forever. By 1637, the market had become extremely overvalued, and soon enough, it would all come crashing down. It's now February 1637. A tulip auction scheduled in the port city of Haarlem is underway. Sellers open their stalls, ready to sell their tulips to what they had anticipated to be hundreds of buyers. The auction begins. It's a slow start. It's been 30 minutes and no buyers have shown up. Maybe they just got the wrong time. So the sellers wait, and wait, and wait. Hours have gone by, and it's clear, absolutely nobody is showing up. Tulip prices have become so overvalued, not even Holland's biggest degenerates were willing to risk buying them. Although economists theorised that the auction's low attendance was due to the outbreak of the bubonic plague, it nonetheless struck fear into the hearts of sellers. It was clear, the party was over, and absolute chaos ensued. Word quickly spread of the botched auction, and speculators began to panic. Traders began offloading their tulips in a desperate attempt to recoup their investments. This panic selling only caused the price to nosedive even faster. As tulip prices were crashing, traders began refusing to honour the futures contracts they had signed months previous, which was completely legal, actually. You see, these futures contracts weren't covered by the law as many had thought.
This is worthless.
Instead, the court simply regarded the trading of futures as gambling.
They're the same picture.
And thus had absolutely no interest in enforcing them. This promptly infuriated thousands of sellers, who began to instantly speedrun bankruptcy. Having made a fortune trading tulips in the months before the crash, dozens of degenerates banded together and put their newfound riches to work by hiring groups of mercenaries to run around Amsterdam, killing off tulips by stomping on them in the dirt, in a desperate attempt to drive tulip prices back up. However, this was unsuccessful, and tulip prices continued to plummet, falling from a high of 200 guilders per bulb to as low as 20, a loss of 90%. During tulip mania, many had borrowed heavily to invest in as many tulips as possible. As the market crashed, many found themselves unable to repay their debts, leading thousands to bankruptcy and financial ruin. There were an abundance of reports of traders so down bad after losing everything, resorting to jumping into canals in a desperate attempt to commit suicide. After witnessing the absolute clusterfuck that was tulip mania, 17th century trolls began pumping out dank memes, mocking the multitude of retards and degenerates that lost their life savings in the market. Jean Bruegel's allegory of tulip mania depicts a bunch of degenerate apes trading tulips. On the right, we see an ape pissing on the flowers, and up here, a speculator is being carried to his grave, possibly after offing himself due to losing his life savings. It's now 1637. The tulip market had completely crashed. Fortunes were lost. The economy no longer booming. Even the tulip itself, its reputation as a symbol of wealth and prosperity, forever tarnished. Nearly 400 years and hundreds of Ponzi schemes and crypto scams later, and we still haven't learned our lesson.